Welcome back to Blueprint for Liberty. In this class, we're going to continue exposing how the Constitution has been twisted by the power-hungry class, what I call the uniparty, to expand the reach and control of the federal government far beyond anything the founders ever intended. This deception has had enormous consequences on our nation and wide swaths of our everyday lives. It's essential that we rein in the federal government back within its constitutional boundaries and relearn a constitutional understanding of enumerated powers. This brings us to the oath of office. All our county sheriffs, state legislators, governors, and judges swear an oath that reads in part like this: I do solemnly swear or affirm that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. Now, it's those domestic enemies that we need to be concerned about. The ancient Roman Republic never fell to an external power until it first crumbled internally. And the same will likely be true of us today in the United States. As Algernon Sidney warned in his seminal work, Discourses Concerning Government, when he intends to exalt a people, he fills both them and their leaders with the virtues suitable to the accomplishment of his end, and takes away all wisdom and virtue from those he resolves to destroy. And so it's those domestic enemies, the enemies of the Constitution and of wisdom and virtue, that we ought to concern ourselves with first. Here's how to understand whether something is constitutional. Everybody here ought to be familiar with the Federalist Papers. They are a collection of 85 letters to the editor, originally published in New York newspapers, written by James Madison, John Jay, and Alexander Hamilton. Their purpose was to help the people of New York and convince their state legislators to understand and ratify the newly proposed Constitution. The Federalist Papers are the greatest single source for explaining the original intent of the Constitution. In Federalist number 45, James Madison wrote, "The powers delegated by the proposed Constitution to the federal government are few and defined." Additionally, in a letter to George Washington, dated February 15, 1791, Thomas Jefferson wrote, "To take a single step beyond the boundaries thus specially drawn around the powers of Congress is to take possession of a boundless field of power, no longer susceptible of any definition." If the powers in the Constitution weren't few and defined, they wouldn't be small enough to legibly print into a small pocket Constitution. Wisely, the framers of the U.S. Constitution chose to simply list the few powers the government does have. They made it simple to say where, if it's not on the list, the federal government simply can't do it. Overall, there are 5 main clauses or parts of the Constitution that are frequently exploited and stretched beyond their original intent to justify federal overreach, what Jefferson referred to as a boundless field of power. The 5 main excuses for unlimited power are: first, the Supremacy Clause in Article 6. Second, the General Welfare Clause in Article 1, Section 8. Third, the Necessary and Proper Clause, also known as the Elastic Clause or Implied Powers Clause, found in Article 1, Section 8, Clause 18. Fourth, the Interstate Commerce Clause found in Article 1, Section 8, Clause 3, which was used to justify the federal health care law known as Obamacare. Fifth and lastly, treaty law, which, like the Supremacy Clause, is also found in Article 6. Now let's take a moment to dismantle one of the most dangerous lies repeated by politicians, professors, and pundits alike. The idea that any law passed by Congress automatically becomes the supreme law of the land. That's false. It's unconstitutional. And the Constitution itself says so if we actually read it. Here's what the Supremacy Clause in Article 6, Clause 2, actually says. This Constitution and the laws of the United States, which shall be made in pursuance thereof, and all treaties made or which shall be made under the authority of the United States, shall be the supreme law of the land. Did you catch that? The key phrase is made in pursuance thereof. That's not legal filler. That's a requirement. It means that the only laws that are made in line with the Constitution, laws that are consistent with the powers actually granted, qualify as supreme law. So what about laws that don't follow the Constitution? What about federal acts that exceed the enumerated powers of Congress? They are not law. They are not supreme. They are not binding. They are null and void. And don't take my word for it. Let's go straight to the source that even the federal government still pretends to respect, the United States Supreme Court. In Marbury versus Madison, the landmark case that established judicial review, the court declared, all laws which are repugnant to the Constitution are null and void. That's not radical. That's not rebellion. That's constitutional law 101. A law that violates the Constitution isn't a law at all. It's a usurpation. It may have a title, a number, and a signature at the bottom, but it has no legitimate authority behind it. Now here's something else most folks miss. Supreme Court decisions aren't even included in the Supremacy Clause. Let's read it again carefully. What does the clause say is supreme? This Constitution and the laws of the United States which shall be made in pursuance thereof, and all treaties made or which shall be made under the authority of the United States shall be the supreme law of the land. That's it. No mention of court opinions, no mention of case law, no mention of precedent. So when a Supreme Court opinion contradicts the Constitution, it carries no more authority than graffiti on a park bench. It may be printed in a fancy volume and quoted in legal briefs, but it is not the supreme law of the land. And here's a basic legal principle known for centuries in common law. Expressio unius ex exclusio alterius. The expression of one thing is the exclusion of others. In plain English, if you make a list and leave something off, you did it on purpose. The founders could have included court decision in the Supremacy Clause. They didn't. That tells us all we need to know. So the next time someone tells you that a Supreme Court ruling or a congressional act is the law of the land, ask them a simple question. Was it made in pursuance of the Constitution? Can you show me the authority in Article 1, Section 8, or Article 3? If they can't, then the act or opinion has no lawful force, no matter how many bureaucrats enforce it or how many judges uphold it. Because at the end of the day, the Constitution, not Congress, not the President, and not the Supreme Court, is the final word on what is lawfully supreme. And we, the people, are the final guardians of that truth. Next on the chopping block is the General Welfare Clause, found in Article 1, Section 8, Clause 1, perhaps the most abused line in the entire Constitution. It reads, "The Congress shall have power to lay and collect taxes, duties, imposts, and excises, to pay the debts and provide for the common defense and the general welfare of the United States." Here's what it really means. Congress can tax and spend for three purposes: to pay the debts, to provide for the common defense, and to promote the general welfare. Now let's take a moment to deal with one of the most abused phrases in the entire Constitution: general welfare. That phrase has been twisted, stretched, and flat out mutilated by politicians who want you to believe it means Congress can do whatever it wants as long as it claims it's for the good of the people. That's not just a misunderstanding, that's a lie. And it's one the founders saw coming from a mile away. James Madison, the father of the Constitution, didn't leave us guessing. In a 1792 letter to Edmund Pendleton, he warned, "If Congress can do whatever in their discretion can be done by money, the government is no longer a limited one possessing enumerated powers, but an indefinite one." Let that hit you square. Madison is telling us that if Congress can simply spend on whatever it wants, as long as it calls it welfare, then we don't have a constitutional republic anymore. We have unlimited government hiding behind unlimited spending. Thomas Jefferson said the same thing in 1817. He wrote, "Congress had not unlimited powers to provide for the general welfare, but were restrained to those specifically enumerated." Now, Jefferson and Madison weren't radicals. They weren't guessing. They were the architects and defenders of limited government. If they say the General Welfare Clause is restricted to the enumerated powers, that's the end of the argument. Here's the key point, and don't miss it. The General Welfare Clause is not a blank check. It's not a license for Congress to go shopping with your liberty. It's not a constitutional permission slip for federal control. What is it then? It's an introduction, a general principle that is immediately followed by a specific list of powers, and that list is spelled out in Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution. In Federalist 41, Madison explained it clearly. He said, "It's common in law to begin with a general statement and then clarify it by listing the particulars." That's exactly what the Constitution does. It has been urged and echoed that the power to provide for the general welfare amounts to an unlimited commission. But what color can the objection have when a specification of the objects alluded to immediately follows the general declaration? In other words, Madison says, just keep reading. In Article 1, Section 8, the enumerated powers can be broken down into two categories: general welfare powers and common defense powers. The general welfare powers include borrow money, regulate commerce, establish uniform rules of naturalization and laws on bankruptcies, coin money, punish counterfeiting, establish post offices and post roads, promote the progress of science and the useful arts by securing for limited times to authors and inventors the exclusive right to their respective writings and discoveries, such as copyright and patents, constitute tribunals inferior to the Supreme Court. The common defense powers include define and punish piracies and felonies committed on the high seas and offenses against the law of nations, declare war, raise and support armies, provide and maintain a navy, make rules to govern and regulate land and naval forces, call forth the militia to execute federal laws, suppress insurrections, and repel invasions, organize, arm, and discipline the militia, and exercise exclusive legislation over the district where the federal seat of the government will be, and to exercise like authority over places purchased with the consent of the state legislatures for the constructions of fort, armories, navy docks and yards, and other needful buildings. Article 1, Section 8 says Congress can tax and spend to provide for the general welfare, and then it lists the specific areas in clauses 1 through 9 where that money can be spent, like paying debts, establishing post offices, regulating commerce among the states, and a handful of other clearly defined duties. Next, in clauses 10 through 17, the Constitution enumerates the common defense powers of Congress. So when a politician says, "I voted for this trillion-dollar program because it's for the general welfare," the right response is, show me where it's listed in Article 1, Section 8. If it's not there, it's not allowed. That's how constitutional government works. It's not based on good intentions. It's based on enumerated powers. And if the General Welfare Clause was meant to be an open door, the rest of the Constitution would be nothing but window dressing. We are blessed that our founders were smarter than that. So after everything we've covered, what's the takeaway? It's this: we must know the list, learn the boundaries, and enforce the limits. The list I'm talking about isn't hidden. It's not encrypted, doesn't require a law degree or a think tank to understand. It's right there in black and white in Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution. It's the list of powers Congress is allowed to exercise. Not suggestions, not examples, limits. Our problem isn't that the Constitution doesn't work. It's that we've stopped demanding obedience to it. The truth is, if Congress were held to just the powers listed in the Constitution, nothing more, we could dismantle 80% of this unconstitutional Leviathan overnight. No lawsuits, no riots, no executive orders. Just faithful adherence to the text. The Departments of Education, Energy, Health and Human Services, gone. Federal gun laws, gone. Unconstitutional surveillance programs, gone. Federal control over schools, farms, businesses, and healthcare, gone. That's the power of enumeration. That's the beauty of a limited government built on consent and law. The Constitution doesn't need to be rewritten. It needs to be reread. It doesn't need reinterpretation. It needs restoration. And that starts with us. Because let me tell you something, friends. The Constitution is not just a relic. It's not a museum piece or a ceremonial parchment. It's the supreme law of the land. And it's long past time we started treating it like it. Politicians won't hold themselves accountable. The courts won't hold them accountable. The media certainly won't. That job belongs to us. In our next session, we're going to take this a step further. We'll tackle 3 more of the Uniparty's favorite escape hatches, 3 of the most misused and misunderstood phrases in the entire document: the Necessary and Proper Clause, the Interstate Commerce Clause, and treaty law. These are the tools the federal government uses to pretend its powers are unlimited. We're going to expose them for what they really are: excuses, not authority. So until then, I'll leave you with this charge. Stay vigilant, stay grounded, stay bold. Because the Constitution is not a suggestion. It's not a talking point. It's not a ceremonial slogan. It is the law. And it's high time we started acting like it. God bless you, and God bless this fight for liberty. I'll see you next time.